My name is Lily Hart, and I'm 31. 3 weeks after my stepfather's funeral, my mother made me stand in the hallway during Thanksgiving dinner. She set a paper plate on the console table and wrote guest across it in black marker. Then she slid his house key across that plate and said, "Outsiders don't inherit family houses." A minute later, she asked me to carry in the pies. I picked up the key, turned the red paper tag over once, and set it back beside her fork. But here's what my mother didn't know. The other side of that tag had my stepfather's handwriting on it, and it said, "For my daughter, Lily." That tag is why I can tell you this story without raising my voice. If you have ever been treated like a guest at a table you helped keep standing, stay with me, like, and subscribe. A paper plate does not decide who belongs. Let me take you back to the first winter. Robert Hart opened the side door for me. I was 10 years old, and I had one blue duffel bag. My mother, Diane, carried her purse inside first. Robert carried my bag. That was the first difference I noticed. Robert did not make a speech about kindness. He just took the bag before my mother could tell me to leave it by the stairs. The house sat on the edge of a small Ohio town, close enough to the elementary school that you could hear the playground whistle on windy afternoons. It was a brick house with a narrow side door beside the driveway. That door mattered before I understood why. Diane had married Robert Hart in a courthouse ceremony 2 weeks before we moved in. She wore a cream suit. I wore the same navy dress I had worn for school pictures, because nobody had bought me anything else. I was 10. I knew how to be quiet in adult rooms. Diane unlocked the front door for herself. Robert opened the side door for me. He said, "This one sticks in the cold. You have to lift the knob first." No big welcome. No movie moment. Just a man showing a child how to get inside without asking permission. My mother heard him and gave a small laugh. "Don't get comfortable," she said. She said it like a joke. That was Diane's favorite trick. She could make cruelty sound like table manners if enough people were nearby. The first rule in that house was simple. Diane belonged wherever she stood. I had to earn every inch. At dinner, there were 5 chairs around the table, and one folding chair near the wall. Diane pointed to the folding chair the first night and said it would be easier, since I was still getting settled. Robert looked at the folding chair. Then he looked at the empty space on his right. He pulled another wooden chair from the mudroom and said, "6 fits." Diane smiled with her lips closed. I sat down slowly, like the chair might be taken back if I moved too fast. A week later, Robert bought me a winter coat from a store near the highway. It was red, with a zipper that did not catch. I remember that because I had spent 2 winters fighting with a zipper that bit the fabric every morning. Robert hung the new coat on the hook by the side door. Diane moved it to the hall closet. "Don't get comfortable," she said again. Robert moved it back. He did not argue. He just put the coat where a child could reach it. That was how he protected me most of the time. Quietly. With his hands. When school started, Diane filled out my emergency card and wrote her own name in the first line. She paused over the second line. Robert was at the sink, rinsing a coffee mug. "Put me down," he said. Diane tapped the pen twice. "She already has a father somewhere," she said. I did not look up from my cereal. Robert dried the mug and said, "Put me down." She wrote his name hard enough to dent the paper. That afternoon when I came home, the side door was locked. I stood in the driveway with my backpack on one shoulder, and my spelling list rolled in my fist. Diane's car was gone. Robert's truck was still there, but I did not know if I was allowed to knock. Then the door opened. Robert held out a small brass key with a red paper tag on it. "This door is yours too," he said. I took it from his palm. On one side of the tag he had written side door. The other side was blank then. I wore that key on a shoelace under my shirt for almost a year. Not because I was dramatic. Because children know when a door can disappear. Diane noticed it one Saturday when I was helping fold towels. She hooked one finger under the string and pulled the key out. "Well," she said, "Robert is generous with things that are not yours." I waited for her to take it. She did not. She let it drop against my chest. That was worse in its own way. She wanted me to feel that even the key in my shirt was borrowed. Robert saw more than he said. That winter, he started doing small repairs at the dining room table after supper. He fixed a drawer pull. He sanded a nick out of a chair leg. He showed me how to hold the wood steady without putting my fingers near the blade. Diane hated that. Not loudly. Diane saved loud for people she had already beaten. With Robert, She used sighs. "You're teaching her like she'll be here forever," she said once. Robert brushed dust into his palm and said, "She lives here." Diane looked at me. "For now." I learned the shape of those two words. For now. They were not a sentence. They were a leash. Years passed in that house by objects. The red coat became too small. The side door key turned dark where my thumb rubbed it. The sixth chair stayed at the table. Diane tried to move it twice. Robert moved it back twice. He never called it a battle. He just made sure the space stayed open. When I was 16, he took that chair into the garage one Sunday afternoon. I thought a leg was loose. I followed him with a glass of iced tea and found him sitting on an overturned paint bucket, the chair upside down in front of him. He had a small carving knife in his hand. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Fixing a wobble," he said. There was no wobble. I knew that. He knew I knew. He took the glass from me and drank half of it. "Your mother thinks a place is real only if people can see it," he said. "I think some things should hold even when nobody is looking." That was one of the few sentences of his that sounded prepared. He looked embarrassed after he said it, so I pretended to study the garage floor. He sent me inside before he finished. I did not ask what he carved. At 22, I moved into my own apartment across town. Diane acted relieved. She told people I was finally finding my own feet, as if she had not spent 12 years stepping on them. Robert helped me carry boxes. He brought a screwdriver, paper towels, and the red side door key in a small envelope. "You keep this," he said. "I don't live there anymore," he said. "I know." That was all. He had a way of making few words do the work of a whole speech. I built a life, not a loud one. I worked in a school cafeteria first, then became the kitchen manager. I knew which children needed an extra carton of milk and which ones hid apples in their pockets for later. I knew what hunger looked like when it was trying to be polite. Robert liked that job for me. Diane did not. "You always did have a talent for leftovers," she said one Christmas, while I was carrying a tray of rolls from the oven. Robert took the tray from my hands before it burned me. "Feeding people is not leftovers," he said. Diane gave him that closed-mouth smile again. She did not say, "Don't get comfortable that day." She did not have to. I heard it anyway. When Robert got sick, the house changed before anyone said the word cancer. His boots stayed by the side door longer. His coffee went cold on the table. Diane began sorting mail before he came downstairs. She used words like simple and practical. She said Robert was tired and did not need extra emotions around paperwork. Extra emotions meant me. I came after work anyway. I made soup he could swallow. I changed the porch bulb because he hated dark steps. I read him the local paper when his eyes watered too much. Diane let me do those things because they were useful. She liked useful. Useful did not require belonging. One evening, Robert asked me to bring him the small toolbox from under the basement stairs. I found it behind 2 paint cans and a bag of old Christmas bows. Inside were labels, screws, a roll of red paper tags, and the little knife he used for wood. He asked me to set it beside his chair. Diane watched from the doorway. "He doesn't need projects," she said. Robert touched the lid of the box and said, "I need my things where I can reach them." His voice was thin by then, but it still made Diane step back. After that, he had me sit with him at the dining room table instead of in the sick room. He would rest one hand on the 6th chair, like he was checking that it had not wandered off. The week before he died, he looked at the table for a long time. "If Thanksgiving gets crowded," he said, "clean that chair first." I laughed because I thought he was being fussy. He did not laugh back. "Promise me," he said. So I promised. I thought I was promising to dust a chair. That is how families like mine hide the important things. They tuck them inside chores, because chores are the only requests nobody questions. Robert died on a Tuesday morning. Diane called me after the hospice nurse had already left. "He's gone," she said. "You don't need to rush." I rushed anyway. When I got there, the side door was locked from the inside. For the first time in 21 years, my key did not open it. I stood in the driveway with my hand on the knob, 10 years old again for one stupid second. Then Mrs. Keller came across the yard in her slippers. She was Robert's neighbor. She had known him before Diane did. She put a hand on my shoulder and said, "He always said you came in through this door." That was not comfort. It was a witness. Diane opened the front door after that. She had changed into black pants and pearl earrings. Her eyes were dry. I will not judge her for that. People grieve strangely. But I will judge what she did next. At the funeral, she stood at the church doors and received people like she was the only person Robert had ever loved. When someone asked if I was family, Diane placed her hand on my back and said, "This is Lily." She helped Robert near the end. Near the end. Not since I was 10. Not through winters, school forms, side doors, soup, keys, and chairs. Near the end. After the burial, Diane hosted coffee at the house. She let me carry cups. She let me take coats. She let me stand near the kitchen while cousins from Robert's side filled the dining room. The sixth chair was gone from the table. I found it in the mudroom with a stack of grocery bags on the seat. I moved the bags. Diane saw me. "Don't," she said. One word. Flat as a hand on a door. I left the chair where it was. Not because she was right. Because I had learned something from Robert. Some doors open better when you stop pushing and look for the key. 2 days after the funeral coffee, I went back to the house with a trash bag and a lie. Diane had called me that morning and said Robert's desk needed to be cleared before it turned into a shrine. She used that word like it was dirty. Shrine. As if keeping a man's pen cup for one more week was the same as refusing to live. I said I could come after work. She sounded pleased by that. Not grateful. Pleased. Gratitude makes room for you. Pleasure uses you, and calls it peace. When I arrived, the side door was unlocked again. I noticed that first. I hated that I noticed it. Diane was in the dining room, sorting sympathy cards into 2 piles. "Robert kept too much paper," she said. "Don't make this emotional." I looked at the empty place where the 6th chair should have been. It was still in the mudroom. The grocery bags were gone. A folded tablecloth covered the seat now. "I'll start with the desk," I said. Robert's desk was in the small room off the kitchen. He kept pencils in a hardware store mug and old envelopes bound with rubber bands. I put 1 trash bag on the floor and 1 empty box on the chair beside me. Trash in the bag. Keep in the box. That was the rule I gave myself, because rules help when grief starts looking for loose places. The top drawer held small harmless things. The second drawer held appliance manuals. The bottom drawer stuck. I lifted the handle the way he had taught me to lift the side door knob. Up first, then pull. The drawer opened. Inside was a brown envelope with 2 words written across the front. Side door. My hand stopped before I touched it. That was the first time the day changed. I looked toward the dining room. Diane was still sorting cards. I could hear paper sliding against paper. I opened the envelope in my lap. There was no dramatic will inside, no map, no check made out to me. Just 3 things, and all of them looked ordinary enough that Diane could have held them and seen nothing. The first was a copy of a letter Robert had written to Mr. Bell, the attorney who handled his trust. The words were plain. He wanted the house kept as a family home. He wanted Diane cared for. He wanted Lily to keep access to the home, as my daughter, in every practical sense of that word. I read that sentence twice. Not because it was hard, because it was the first time I had seen the word daughter attached to me in Robert's handwriting. The second paper was a note about a monthly house allowance. It said Diane had signed for that money after Robert entered hospice. The meaning was simple enough for anyone to understand. Diane was being paid to keep the house open, repaired, and unsold unless the named family agreed. She was being paid to keep a door open. The third thing was a photograph. Robert was in the garage, sitting on the overturned paint bucket. The 6th chair was upside down in front of him. His hand covered part of the underside, but I could see the carving knife beside his knee and the first 2 letters cut into the wood. L.I. I held the photograph until the edge bent against my thumb. Then Diane called from the dining room. "Are you finding anything useful?" I slid the papers back into the envelope. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded normal. That surprised me. I did not take the envelope. Not then. A person like Diane would notice an empty space before she noticed a full lie. So I took pictures with my phone, 1 page at a time. I put the envelope back exactly where I found it. I straightened the pencil mug. I threw away 3 dried pens. Very glamorous. Pens in a trash bag. If I stormed into the dining room waving paper, Diane would turn the room into a courtroom and herself into the widow under attack. She had trained for that role longer than I had trained for anything. So I did what Robert would have done. I fixed the drawer. I wiped the desk. I went home. That night, I called the number at the top of Robert's letter. A receptionist answered first. Then a man with a careful voice came on the line. "This is Daniel Bell." I stood in my kitchen with the fridge humming behind me and the red-tagged key on the counter. "My name is Lily Hart," I said. "I'm calling about Robert Hart's family trust." There was a pause. Not a confused pause. A careful one. "Yes, Miss Hart," he said. "I was expecting you might." That sentence put one hand on my back and one hand over my mouth. It comforted me and scared me at the same time. I asked if I was named in any paperwork. Mr. Bell did not answer the way people answer when the answer is no. He asked, "Are you somewhere private?" I looked at the key. Yes, he said he could not discuss every detail over the phone. Then he asked me a question that made no sense until later. "Is the sixth chair still in the dining room?" I turned toward my own small table, as if the chair might be there. "No," I said. "My mother moved it to the mudroom." The silence changed. "Did she remove it before guests came into the house?" he asked. "After the funeral. Before coffee." He exhaled once, low and tired. "Please don't confront her yet," he said. That was when I knew the chair was not just a chair. The next week, Diane became cheerful. That was never a good sign. She called me on Monday and asked what dish I was bringing for Thanksgiving. Not whether I was coming. What dish? Her voice had that bright edge people use when they have already decided your answer for you. "I thought Thanksgiving might be small this year," I said. "Oh no," she said. "Robert would have wanted the house full." That was the first time she used Robert as a decoration. By Wednesday, I learned what full meant. A cousin from Robert's side called to ask if I knew Diane was inviting people to look at the property. He said it gently. He did not want to be the messenger. Nobody ever wants to be the messenger when a house is involved. That night, I drove past the house after work. There was a small sign on the porch rail from a real estate company. Not a yard sign. Diane was too careful for that. This one was tucked near a planter, like a secret wearing business clothes. I sat in my car for 3 minutes. Then I took a picture. On Thursday, Diane sent a group text. "Thanksgiving at 1. Family table will be tight. Lily, please bring pies and serving spoons. Family table will be tight." That was Diane's whole talent in 6 words. She could push you out and make it sound like furniture. I forwarded the text to Mr. Bell. He called me 10 minutes later and asked, "Has she signed a listing agreement?" I said, "I don't know." He asked, "Has she accepted money?" I said, "I don't know." Then he asked, "Has she told you not to sit at the family table?" I looked at the message again. She hasn't used those words. He said, "Keep the message." It did not feel like enough. That was the lowest point before Thanksgiving. Not the hallway. Not the paper plate. That Thursday night, with my phone in my hand, I felt how thin my proof was. A key, a photograph, a message with polite poison in it. A lawyer who would not explain the whole thing. A chair in a mudroom. Diane had a house full of people and a dead husband's last name. I had screenshots. The next morning, I went back to the house while Diane was at a hair appointment. She had asked me to drop off extra serving spoons. That was her mistake. She still thought usefulness and obedience were the same thing. Mrs. Keller was raking leaves next door. She lifted one gloved hand when I pulled into the driveway. I used my key on the side door. It opened. That small click steadied me more than any speech could have. Inside, the dining room was already set for 5. 5 cloth napkins. 5 water glasses. 5 little cards with names written in Diane's pointed handwriting. The 6th chair was still in the mudroom, half covered by the tablecloth. I carried the spoons to the kitchen first. Then I went to the mudroom. I lifted the tablecloth. The chair looked ordinary from above. Scratched arms. Dark legs. One pale mark where Robert had sanded the seat years ago. I crouched and tipped it just enough to see the underside. The carving was there, not all of it. The chair was heavy, and I heard a car pass slowly outside. I only had a few seconds, but I saw enough. Lily H. My throat closed so fast I had to put the chair down before I dropped it. I did not flip it all the way over. I did not let myself finish reading. Not alone in the mudroom, not with Diane Dubac. Not before the right people were in the room. Some truths need witnesses. I lowered the tablecloth back over the chair, then I stood up and saw Diane in the doorway. She was holding a dry cleaning bag over one arm. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she looked at the chair. She looked at me. Her face did not change much, but her fingers tightened around the hanger. "You always hover around things that aren't yours," she said. There it was. Not the old phrase. A new blade. I picked up the empty spoon bag from the counter and said, "I brought what you asked for." She stepped aside to let me pass, but not enough. I had to turn my shoulder. That was another Diane trick. Make the doorway smaller, then pretend you chose to squeeze. At the side door, she said, "Thanksgiving is going to be hard enough without you making it strange." I put my hand on the knob and said, "It's already strange." That was all I gave her. In my car, I texted Mr. Bell 3 words. "The carving is there." He replied after 4 minutes, "Do not move the chair." Then another message came. "I will be nearby Thanksgiving afternoon." Nearby was not the same as there. It still helped. By the time I drove home, the sun had gone down. My phone sat on the passenger seat. The red-tagged key lay beside it. For the first time since Robert died, I understood that Diane was not only trying to sell a house, she was trying to sell the version of the family where I had never had a seat, and she had chosen Thanksgiving to do it. Thanksgiving came cold and bright. I arrived at 12:30 with 2 pumpkin pies, 1 apple pie, and the serving spoons Diane had asked for twice. She had sent a reminder that morning at 7:14. "Please don't be late. People are coming. People. Not family. Not Robert's cousins. People." I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment with the pies on the passenger seat. The red-tagged key was in my coat pocket. My phone was face up in the cup holder. There was no message from Mr. Bell. Across the yard, Mrs. Keller's curtains moved. Then her front door opened. She stepped onto her porch with a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. I lifted one hand. She lifted hers back. Diane opened the front door before I could use the side door. That was on purpose. She was wearing a dark green dress and pearl earrings. Her hair was pinned in the soft way women choose when they want guests to call them strong. She looked past my face to the pies. "Oh good," she said. "You brought enough." She did not say hello. She did not say come in. She took the apple pie from the top and turned toward the dining room, already speaking over her shoulder. "Put the rest in the kitchen. The table is tight." The house smelled like turkey, furniture polish, and a candle Robert would have hated. I carried the pies through the hall. The dining room was set for 5. 5 plates, 5 cloth napkins, 5 water glasses, 5 name cards. Diane had written each name in black ink. Her own card sat at the head of the table. Robert's place had been removed completely, not left empty, not honored, just erased. The 6th chair was not in the dining room. I knew where it was. I also knew not to look yet. A woman in a camel coat stood near the buffet, with a leather folder tucked under one arm. A man I did not know stood beside her, studying the ceiling beams like they were already his. They were too polished to be cousins, and too interested in the windows to be mourners. Diane saw me notice them. "Some friends are stopping by," she said. "Friends do not measure a room with their eyes." I set the pies on the kitchen counter. When I came back, Diane was placing a paper plate on the narrow console table in the hallway. My name was not on it. Only one word. Guest. She had written it in the same black marker she used for the name cards. The ink was still shiny. That detail did something to me. Not the word, the wetness of it. She had not written it hours earlier and forgotten herself. She had written it just before I walked in. Diane slid the red-tagged key onto the plate. She had taken it from the small bowl by the hall mirror, where I had set it for 1 minute while removing my coat. Then she looked at me in front of the dining room doorway, the buyers behind her, Robert's cousins already seated, and Mrs. Keller visible through the glass of the side door. "Outsiders don't inherit family houses," she said. The room did not go silent. That only happens in movies. In real life, people keep breathing. A fork touches a plate. Someone clears his throat and pretends it is not a choice. The woman with the leather folder lowered her eyes to her shoes. Diane smiled like she had just made a necessary correction. "You can eat in the kitchen after we serve," she said. "I need you to bring in the pies first." That was the point of the whole afternoon. Not the house. Not the table. Me carrying dessert past 5 full-place settings, while strangers watched Diane prove I was useful but not wanted. I picked up the key. I turned the red tag once between my fingers. For a second, I thought about saying everything right there. The envelope. The allowance. Mr. Bell. The chair. The carving. I could have spilled all of it on that hallway table beside the paper plate. But Diane was waiting for that. She knew how to handle a woman who sounded angry. She would soften her voice, put one hand to her chest, and become a widow being attacked on Thanksgiving. The buyers would step back. The cousins would tell themselves grief made everybody strange. By evening, I would be the problem she had survived. So I set the key back on the plate. Not beside her fork this time, on the word guest. The red tag covered the middle of it. Diane's eyes flicked down. Only once. Then she recovered. Pies, she said. I went to the kitchen. That was the worst 5 minutes. Not because I was broken. I was not. Not because I doubted Robert. I did not. It was worst because the room had weight. 5 plates. 1 paper plate. 2 strangers. A folder. A chair hidden under a tablecloth. A lawyer who was not there. My proof felt small in my pocket. A key can feel small when a whole room has decided not to see a door. I stood at the sink and ran water over my hands, though they were clean. I needed one ordinary sound. Water was something nobody could argue with. My phone stayed dark. No message. For a moment, I thought maybe Mr. Bell had changed his mind. Maybe nearby meant too far. Maybe the letter was not enough. Maybe the carving was private and the trust was complicated, and Diane would smile her way through lunch while the house slipped quietly into someone else's hands. Then I looked out the kitchen window. Mrs. Keller had crossed the yard. She stood on the back step with a covered dish in both hands. Diane had not invited her in. Mrs. Keller did not knock. She just stood there, small and stubborn, holding what looked like green bean casserole under foil. If you have ever had to stay calm because one loud word would be used against you, write steady in the comments. What happened next is why my mother never used the word outsider again. I opened the back door. Mrs. Keller looked at my face and did not ask if I was all right. People ask that when they want a quick answer. She lifted the dish instead. Robert liked too much onion on these, she said. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was true. He did, I said. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. That changed the air. Not enough to save me. Enough to remind me I was not imagining the room. Diane appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes went to Mrs. Keller first, then to me. I thought you were resting today, Diane said. Mrs. Keller took off one glove finger by finger. I rested yesterday. That was all. Diane could not push her out without showing too much of herself, so she smiled and turned that smile on me. Lily, she said, everyone is waiting. I picked up the pumpkin pies. Mrs. Keller picked up the apple. Diane did not like that. I saw it in the small hard line beside her mouth. We walked into the dining room together. The woman with the leather folder had opened it now. A few pages rested on the buffet. I saw a colored tab on the top sheet. Diane's reading glasses sat beside it. That folder was not visiting. It was working. Robert's cousin nearest the window looked at me, then at the paper plate in the hall, then away. That was his choice. I do not hate him for it. People who have spent their lives avoiding conflict can mistake cowardice for politeness. Diane clapped her hands once. Before we eat, she said, I want to thank everyone for being here in Robert's home. Robert's home. The words passed through the room cleanly. She knew exactly how to use the dead. Dead men cannot correct a sentence at dinner. She continued, This house has been a great comfort to me, but it is too much for one person now. Robert would have wanted practical decisions. The woman with the folder nodded. So did the man by the window. I set the pies on the buffet. Diane turned to me. And Lily, she said, sweet as canned frosting, why don't you say thank you properly for being included today? There it was, the final move. She wanted gratitude on record. She wanted me to thank her in front of buyers, relatives, and the one neighbor Robert trusted. If I refused, I was bitter. If I obeyed, I accepted the part she had written for me. I looked at the table. 5 chairs. 5 plates. 1 folder. 1 paper plate in the hallway. Then I looked at the mudroom door. The 6th chair was behind it. Diane followed my eyes. For the first time that day, she stopped smiling. I did not hurry. I walked past her. I opened the mudroom door. The tablecloth was still over the chair. I lifted it off and folded it once. Then I gripped the chair by the back with both hands. It was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe the room was. Nobody spoke while I carried it in. The legs knocked once against the doorframe. Mrs. Keller set the apple pie down on the buffet and put one hand flat on the wood, like she needed to feel something solid. I placed the sixth chair at the table. Not at the corner. Not behind me. At the open space on Robert's right. Diane took one step forward. "Lily," she said. I looked at her. My voice came out calm. "You asked me to say thank you properly." I put one hand under the seat. "So I'm going to start with the chair." The chair did not flip easily. Robert had built things to last. Even his dining chairs seemed to have opinions. I kept one hand under the seat and one hand on the back, and for a second, the whole room watched me struggle with a piece of furniture Diane had spent years pretending did not matter. Then Mrs. Keller stepped forward. She did not say anything. She just put one hand on the other side of the chair and helped me turn it. The underside faced the room. There, cut into the wood in Robert's uneven hand, were 6 words. "Lily Hart, my daughter." No one had to explain it. That was the mercy of it. For years, Diane had made belonging sound complicated. Robert had carved it into a chair. The room changed before anyone spoke. The cousin by the window lowered his fork onto his napkin. The woman with the leather folder closed it with 2 fingers. The man beside her stopped looking at the ceiling beams. Mrs. Keller's hand stayed on the chair, but her thumb moved once over the carved letters. Diane looked at the words. Then she looked at the paper plate in the hallway. For the first time that afternoon, her face did not know which mask to choose. She reached for her water glass and missed the stem. Her fingertips struck the side of it. Water moved in a small clear ring, but the glass did not fall. I thought of Robert in the garage, sitting on that paint bucket, pretending to fix a wobble that was never there. I thought of him saying some things should hold even when nobody was looking. I kept my voice level and said, "He made me a place before you made me a guest." Diane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was not like her. Diane was never without a sentence. She had a sentence for grief, for money, for doors, for coats, for daughters she did not want to call daughters. But she did not have one for Robert's knife in that wood. The woman with the folder looked at Diane. "Is this a family matter?" she asked, very quietly. Diane heard the danger in that question. So did I. She straightened. "It's an old chair," she said. "Robert was sentimental near the end." Mrs. Keller turned her head. "No," she said. "One word. Small. Hard." Diane's eyes cut to her. Mrs. Keller did not back up. She laid her palm flat against the underside of the seat, right beside my name. "He carved that chair the week Lily got her first key." The woman with the folder looked toward the hallway plate. The red tag still sat across the word guest. Diane saw the movement. She moved fast then. Too fast. "Everyone is making this into something ugly," she said. "Robert loved peace. He would be ashamed of this." The doorbell rang. "Nobody knew you wing. See you with Rewang. You with 3 second because. You 1 second one interruption could save a room. It could not." I walked to the front door. Mr. Bell stood on the porch in a gray coat with a slim folder under his arm. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked past me once, into the dining room, and then back at my face. "Miss Hart," he said, "may I come in?" I stepped aside. Diane said, "This is a private family dinner." Mr. Bell paused in the hallway beside the paper plate. His eyes went to the word guest, then to the key, then to the chair facing the room. "It appears to be a family matter," he said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He walked into the dining room and set his folder on the buffet, away from the pies and away from the buyer's papers. Even then, he did not mix Robert's business with Diane's performance. Diane recovered enough to laugh once. "If this is about paperwork, Daniel, it can wait." He said, "No, it can't." The room took that in. Diane's cousin pushed his chair back an inch. The legs made a dry sound on the floor. The woman with the leather folder slid her own documents under her arm. The man by the window finally stopped pretending he was not part of the afternoon. Mr. Bell looked at Diane. "Did you remove this chair from the dining table before today's guests arrived?" Diane blinked. "That is not a legal question," he said. "It is a simple one." Her hand went to her pearls. "I rearranged the room." Mr. Bell nodded once, as if he had expected exactly that answer. Then he looked at the hallway. "Did you place Miss Hart's key on that plate?" Diane's face tightened. She left it there. I said, no. I did not add anything. One word was enough. Mrs. Keller took off her other glove and set it on the buffet beside the apple pie. Diane looked around the room then. Not for help. For a weak spot. She did not find one quickly enough. Mr. Bell opened his folder. He did not read a long paragraph. He did not turn the room into a seminar. He took out one page and placed it on the table beside the sixth chair. At Robert Hart's direction, he said, this home was placed under a family trust. Diane Hart was allowed to remain here and receive a monthly house allowance under conditions she signed. The buyers' faces changed at the word conditions. Diane said, Robert wanted me taken care of. Mr. Bell said, yes, he did. That stopped her for half a breath. Then he turned the page so the signature line faced the room. He also wanted Lily Hart to retain access to this home as his daughter, in every practical sense of that word. You signed acknowledgement of that provision on March 4th. The woman with the leather folder looked at Diane and asked, did you disclose that? Diane did not answer. That was the second silence. The first silence belonged to the chair. This one belonged to the money. Mr. Bell did not push. He only removed a cream envelope from the folder and set it beside Diane's place card. Because you attempted to sell the property without required consent, and because you publicly denied access to a named family beneficiary, your authority over the home is suspended as of today. Diane stared at the envelope. Suspended was a clean word. The room understood the dirty part. The folder on the buffet no longer mattered. The buyers no longer mattered. Diane's place at the head of the table had become a chair under a ceiling she no longer controlled. The woman with the leather folder closed her bag. We can't proceed, she said. Her husband touched her elbow, and they both stepped back from the buffet. Diane turned to them. Please don't be ridiculous. The woman did not look at her. She looked at me. I'm sorry, she said. Then she walked toward the door. That was the first thing Diane lost in front of us. Not the whole house yet. Not the allowance yet. The sale. The thing she had dressed up and invited in, and tried to make polite. It left wearing a camel coat. Mr. Bell picked up Diane's place card and moved the cream envelope into its spot. He did not touch her plate. He did not need to. The house allowance is also frozen pending trustee review, he said. You will receive written notice tomorrow. Diane's chair made a sharp sound as she stood. You can't do this on Thanksgiving. Mr. Bell looked at the carved chair. I didn't choose the day. The room knew who had. Diane turned on me then. There she was. Not the widow, not the hostess. Not the practical woman making hard choices. Just my mother, furious that I had not stayed where she placed me. You planned this, she said. I said, no, Robert did. Robert had not predicted a paper plate in a hallway or a real estate folder beside pumpkin pie. He had done something better. He had told the truth before she needed to lie. Diane's eyes went back to the carving. For a moment, I saw the thing she understood before she could bear it. Robert had not merely been kind to me. He had contradicted her in wood, ink, money, and trust. He had done it while he was alive. He had done it when she could still have chosen decency. She had chosen the plate. Mrs. Keller made a small sound then. Not a sob. Something quieter. She touched the carved letters once more and said, he was so proud when he finished it. That was the only time my throat nearly broke. Not when Diane called me an outsider. Not when Mr. Bell froze the allowance. When I heard the word proud, I had spent most of my life trying to be no trouble in that house. Robert had been proud of a chair with my name under it. Diane sat down slowly. She did not sit at the head of the table. She missed the chair by an inch, corrected herself, and lowered into it with one hand braced against the table. Her pearls had twisted to one side. Mr. Bell gathered his papers. Miss Hart, he said to me, do you have your key? I walked to the hallway. The red tag still covered the middle of guest. I picked it up. Yes, I said. I did not put it in my pocket right away. I brought it back to the dining room and laid it on the seat of the sixth chair, under Robert's carved words. Side door on one side. For my daughter, Lily on the other. Diane watched my hand the whole time. She looked at the chair, then at the key, then at me. And for the first time in my life, my mother looked at me as if I was not asking for a place in her family. I was standing in the one Robert had already left me. I folded the paper plate in half. I set it beside the failed sale folder. Then I pulled the sixth chair into the table. Diane left the house 6 weeks after Thanksgiving. Not in one dramatic storm. Not with a slammed door and a speech. Life is rarely that generous. She left in boxes from the grocery store and 2 borrowed suitcases with 1 broken wheel. Mr. Bell sent the formal notice the next morning, just as he said he would. Diane's authority over the house was suspended. The monthly house allowance stopped. The sale could not move forward. The couple with the leather folder withdrew before dessert cooled on the counter. By Monday, the small real estate sign had disappeared from the porch rail. By Christmas, Diane had moved into a condo on the other side of town, one with beige carpet and a balcony that looked over a parking lot. I did not choose it for her. I did not pack for her. I did not stand in the doorway to watch her carry things out. I signed what Mr. Bell asked me to sign. I met the trustee once in Robert's office. We checked the side steps, the furnace, and the back fence, and I asked for the steps to be fixed first because Robert had hated dark steps. The woman with the clipboard wrote it down. I remember that because nobody in my family had ever written down what I wanted, like it was a normal thing to ask. The first thing I fixed was the mudroom light. The second thing I did was bring the sixth chair back to the dining room and leave it there. I did not polish the carving every day. I did not turn it over for visitors like proof. I knew what was under that seat. That was enough. I changed the side door lock, not because I wanted to punish my mother, but because a boundary without a lock is just a wish with better manners. Diane called me 3 weeks after she moved. Her name came up on my phone while I was wiping flour off the kitchen counter. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. She did not say hello. She said, "I was afraid." I looked at the side door. The new brass key hung on its hook. The red-tagged key rested in a small dish below it, retired but not hidden. Of what? I asked. There was a long breath on the line. Of being left with nothing. That answer would have broken my heart when I was younger. At 31, it only told me where the knife had come from. It did not make the cut smaller. You were not left with nothing, I said. You were left with care. You tried to turn care into ownership. She was quiet. Then she said the closest thing to an apology I ever got. I should not have used that plate. The plate. Not the years. Not the locked door. Not the way she said near the end at Robert's funeral. The plate was the part she could name, because the plate had witnesses. I agree, I said. Another pause. Can I come by sometime? She asked. I wiped one last line of flour from the counter. It vanished under the cloth. No, I said. Not for a while. She said, I'm your mother. I said, I know. I did not say it with anger. Anger would have given her something to wrestle. I said it like a fact written on a form, she cried then. Softly. Maybe for me. Maybe for herself. Maybe for the house. I did not try to sort it. People can be sorry and still unsafe. People can be frightened and still cruel. Both things can fit in the same room. I forgive what I can, I told her. I'm not handing you a key. That was the boundary. No speech, no punishment, just a closed door with my hand steady on the knob. The house did not become easy after that. People think winning gives you peace all at once. It does not. Winning gives you a room where peace can start working. For a while, I noticed every absence. Robert's boots were gone. His coffee mug sat too clean in the cabinet. The chair on his right was mine now, and some evenings I could not sit in it. I would eat standing at the kitchen counter like I was still waiting to be told where I belonged. One of Robert's cousins left a voicemail that began, I hope there are no hard feelings. Which is what people say when they are hoping you will carry the hard feelings quietly for both of you. I did not call him back that day. Later, I sent a short message. I told him I was not angry that he had been uncomfortable. I was hurt that he had chosen comfort over honesty. He sent back 3 words. You're right. Sorry. It did not fix the table. But it moved 1 chair. Then February came. Mrs. Keller knocked on the side door with a grocery bag full of onions. I made too much soup, she said. She had not. She came in anyway. We ate at the table. She took the chair nearest the window. I sat in the 6th chair. Neither of us mentioned the carving until she was leaving. At the door, she touched the red tag in the dish. He meant that, she said. I said, I know. She said, no, you know the words. I mean, he meant the work. She pointed to the lock, the clean step, the table set for two. This, she said. After she left, I stood there for a while with my hand on the doorframe. Robert had not just left me a house. He had left me the ordinary work of staying. So I stayed. I painted the hallway. I gave away Diane's candle. I put Robert's hardware store mug back on the desk and filled it with pencils that actually worked. On the first Thanksgiving after he died, I did not host a big dinner. I was not ready for a room full of voices. I cooked one turkey breast, 2 pies, and green beans with too much onion because Mrs. Keller insisted tradition required bad judgment. She came over at 1. Mr. Bell stopped by for coffee at 3. He brought a small envelope of final papers and one awkward smile. Lawyers are not built for casseroles, but he tried. Before we ate, I turned the 6th chair over. Only once. Mrs. Keller stood beside me. The carving had collected a little dust in the grooves, so I cleaned it with the corner of a dish towel. Lily Hart, my daughter. I did not cry. I breathed. That was better. Then I set the chair back down and sat in it. Family is not always the person who shares your blood. Sometimes it is the man who leaves a key where your hand can find it. Sometimes it is the neighbor who crosses a cold yard because silence would make her an accomplice. Sometimes it is the proof under a chair, waiting until the room is finally honest enough to see it. It was never really about the house. It was about who got to decide I was only passing through. My mother chose a paper plate. Robert chose wood, ink, a key, and a chair. I know which one held. That's my story. 1 paper plate, 1 red tag, 1 6th chair, and a side door my mother could not lock. If someone has ever treated you like a guest in a life you helped hold together, please hear me clearly. You do not become temporary because someone writes the word on a plate. You do not have to keep shrinking to fit the seat they left you. Build your door. Keep your key. And when the right chair is finally pulled back to the table, sit down without apologizing. If this story reminded you of someone who made room for you, share it with them. Tell me in the comments what object in your life means you belong. And if you want more stories about dignity, family, and the quiet moment truth stands up, subscribe before you go. My name is Lily Hart. I'm 31 years old. And I do not eat Thanksgiving dinner from paper plates anymore.